hello, Shiva here. Welcome to another episode of the GenAI CIO Podcast. This is a special episode because this is where we get our very first guest on the show. We have Apoorva Ruparel, a good friend of ours, and also just founded a company, a venture firm called Vantage Point Fund. And Apoorva has been Apoorva is an investor. He's been an investor, but there are a lot more sides to Apoorva. He's been a board member, an observer. He's been a partner at Venture Rock previously. He's been a product owner, a strategy head, a business head. So one very key difference that we see in Apoorva's profile is that he's not just an investor; he's an operator who turned an investor. So he really understands entrepreneurship. He's had a few tremendous exits. He's been he's founded companies including Subtra, Arraystorm, CleanRay, AirMe in the past. So we're really excited to have Apoorva on the pod here, and excited to understand what his views are when it comes to investing in the Gen AI space. Also companies who are founders who are building in generative AI. What should they look at? How could they approach venture capital firms as well? So with that, I welcome Apoorva once again. Apoorva, happy to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. The one thing that I have always, kind of enjoyed with Shiva and Rishabh is nerding out on Gen AI, and I at least trust their feedback when I want to kind of test out a hypothesis or test a specific platform strength or their claim. I kind of always rely on Shiva and Rishabh to, do the intelligence for me and come back. But yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Rishabh, over to you.
All right. First of all, Apoorva, very warm welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking time out for this. And while there are multiple achievements that you have, which Shiva has already highlighted, what I would be very interested in learning about is the latest venture that you've started, which is more focused towards seed investment for startups focused on AGI for intelligence as service. Well, I'd love to understand what inspired you to probably do that now. But first, if we can help, or probably what is your vision, or what do we mean by intelligence as a service in the AGI world today? What was your vision when you were starting this?
I think first I want to go back to all the praise that Shiva and Rishabh are giving me. I think honestly, in my view, I have definitely gained a tremendous amount of experience. I have created some value, but of course, my humility also always puts me there, saying there's a lot more to be done yet in the future. So I always say I'm a glass quarter full, where I have something to offer, and then I have three-fourths space so that I can learn more. So it lots to go ahead. I actually am of the opinion, Rishabh, right now that I am, for the first time in my life, I am at the right place, right time, with the right people in the right ecosystem, and it has taken me 20 plus years to get here. And then, of course, you have the industry dynamic of technology revolution cycles which happen, and this time I was able to time it well.
Nice.
And I see myself, being there to be able to have an opportunity to really create true legacy rather than just wealth, which is, I think, something all of us with our backgrounds want to create. So that's the first. We've been seeing. So if you look at my career, apart from my corporate career, my first startup, AirMe, which was a mobile social UGC, kind of platform. 2007 is when we've been using machine learning since then. In every other startup that I've founded, if it was an IoT based or a LED semiconductor based, everywhere machine learning has been kind of at the forefront to create different applications which would suit our customers' needs. So we've been watching this space for a long time. Then, of course, with all the right from early 2000s when we saw IBM creating the supercomputer to kind of beat Gary Kasparov, and then Google doing it to beat the champion for AlphaGo basically. You start seeing the narrow AI coming into existence, and then Tesla is coming up, and then there's Siri, and then there's Alexa. Um, but we waited for a very long time saying, how will this kind of turn out? And when we started seeing these early GPT, I would still call them hallucinations, is when we said, oh, there is a technology turn coming up. There's a curve ahead where you have to take a side. And I think Mira Murati and Sam and Elon and all these guys were at that time clearly taking sides, saying, should we make it open standard or should it be proprietary? Should we make it generalistic, or it should be immediately aiming towards AGI? And I think during those times you had to kind of take a stance where you want to be. And I'm not talking about 5-6 years back, but I'm saying generally when you look at it, let's say around 2022 mid, right? You basically had to say, what is the opportunity for you here? And I think my consulting enterprise and then investment experience also in the SaaS and B2B space kind of brought me to this conclusion that you need to find an opportunity which would be consumed by the enterprise, not the consumer. So my first hypothesis was, how will generative AI affect enterprises? Then where should we invest, right? So the idea was, hey, there is GAI, which is generative AI, and then there is AGI, and these are like two poles. I think there should be some value creation in the journey. And what are the opportunities? The opportunities are dirty, dangerous, monotonous jobs, or jobs which have human errors causing lots of losses. Banking, insurance are the perfect examples of those industries. How do you create opportunities in this transition from generative AI to AGI and back founders who would reduce human intervention by creating intelligence as a service? So that was the hypothesis with which, or the ambition with which I took, and then kind of found the right team across who also believed in this story. So at Vantage Point, that's what we do. We go deeper detail. We are a $100 million fund. We invest 3 to 4 million check sizes. We're going to invest in 20 companies in the next 3 years. We are clearly taking bets on two types. We are not investing in generative models, which is the core infra side, but we are investing in the application layer and then the enablement layer, which is the AI ops, ML ops, layer, which would enable faster, accelerated adoption of enterprises. And on the application, of course, like I said, org functions being transformed using generative AI as a catalyst to create own information and decision systems, which would basically be agents in the enterprise performing certain functions. Does that answer your question? I wanted to kind of segue you through the entire thought process because a lot of stuff comes from the background as well.
No, absolutely. I think, yeah, this is brilliant answer how you've actually stitched together. While you obviously answered while I was very keen to understand what do we mean by, or what does Vantage mean by information as a service. So thanks for that, Apoorva. And I really love the inspiration that you've highlighted over here, right? So, yeah, so Shiva, over to you.
Yeah. On that note, Apoorva, when you said investing in generative AI application companies and the operations companies, I mean, you've done. I mean, you've built companies in the tech space and then the embedded system space. You've invested in even more broader range of industries. So, what do you think the Gen AI's impact is going to be across industries from an investor point of view? What's the outlook?
I mean, there are
Is
so many layers to that question, right? Like, if you look at currently the big, huge demand in the consumer space, right, which is truly adding value to the creator economy, in various application forms, which is where generative AI is really taken off. There is, of course, abundance, and I think the clouds of abundance will clear out when certain winners will kind of come out. So I think Gen AI is definitely changing, and I'm only looking at the positives right now. I don't like to talk negatives. Of course, there are repercussions of fake and stuff, but I mean, all technology cycles have kind of crossed through, right? Like when Mark and Reason was talking about SSL, everybody was like, what? No, you are going to hide, cyber bullies behind SSL. And Mark Andreessen was like, can't you see e-commerce is going to take off in the next 10, 15 years? So every cycle has this positive and negative. I'm only going to stick to the positive side. So I think what Gen AI has done in the consumer consumption space as artists, music creators, content creators is fascinating to watch.
Okay.
I don't think it's a value life cycle which will last from an investment perspective. I also play to my strengths, and that's why I said I think I am a more of an enterprise guy. And if you look at past history, the true value unlock eventually happens in the enterprise. Especially with technologies like generative AI, right? Like it's not going to be like an app like a Uber or Instagram, which is going to change, human behavior. But I think it's going to be. I see this as, when Siebel refused to turn to cloud and collapsed, but Salesforce, kind of picked up cloud and created SaaS as a model. I think
Yeah.
we are in that era. So from that perspective, there are three pieces to enterprise adoption, right? Productivity, cost reduction, and error reduction. So everybody is talking about, while people are talking about taking jobs, etc. I think human plus AI is equal to not only efficiency but accuracy as well. I don't think people are looking at the accuracy aspect. I've been talking to a lot of CIOs across banks, and the first thing they would tell me is, "Hey, you appreciate the fact that you're talking about agents in customer service, but do you know that we lose hundreds of millions only on human error? If you came up with a solution using generative AI, which would be 96 to 98% more accurate, we would save millions of dollars." So don't worry about just human replacement. I think there is so much more to add efficiency. So humans plus AI will win. That's the way we are thinking about the enterprise. I also want to cover a lot of um, let's say resistance, which definitely will be there. I think the context of data has changed from who's buying what, where, and providing them recommendations, which was machine learning and AI's narrow usage, to now data has moved to information in our view, which is the context of decision making, cognitive learning, heuristic engines, which means that at least the agent transformation or intelligence as a service we're talking about information about how quickly was the problem resolved, what was the tone of the customer in multimodal, like in voice. Um, so to be able to get there, you will need a lot of data plus learning, training, and then decision support system, which can only happen with tons of data. So of course, today if you look at data, there's public data, private data, and then open source. But to be able to train, you need the enterprise unlock and start consuming these intelligence as a service. But the biggest resistance is if you are not going to be able to offer on-prem or on private cloud kind of intelligence as a service solutions, they are not going to adopt it. And then you
Yeah.
are in a chicken and egg story where you won't be able to find intelligence or information lakes unless you create these adoptions. So I think we are trying to see how Gen AI can be used with all these resistance and constraints with founders to transform org functions, which they clearly recognize where human reduction is possible to reduce errors or increase accuracy, apart from just productivity and cost reduction. Does that answer your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was interesting when you said that enterprise. I mean, generative AI is unlike other technologies that came in the recent past. For example, we had our crypto and NFT. I would say the whole this one just a couple of years back. But that wasn't exciting. But Gen AI is exciting because all of us are able to touch and feel machine learning and AI like it's a common man could access. That's something. Credit goes to Sam for getting that out, isn't it?
I totally agree, and I'm sure he has also had this serendipitous journey with Mira, and how they came up with, simply put, jack of all, master of none kind of AI, which is generative AI,
Yeah.
generative as well as generalized AI. But I still want to comment on your thing about. I think over a period of time, I've learned that technologies. So there are these micro technology waves which come, and then there are these major ones, right? Like Web3, what excited me was distributed computing as a technology, distributed ledger, and the whole concept. But the application, it was so clear that the application of NFTs, and digital currency, um, was not digital currency or like Bitcoin, but I'm just saying like NFT was so gimmicky. As I think one of the key measures of application, if you are not able to create an application for enterprise in the next 2 years and adoption, then that technology is not going to last. You know what I mean? And that's what's changed with Gen AI. Today, you've reduced MVP cycles, you've reduced iteration cycles to find the product
Yeah.
market fit, um, and thus enterprises are adopting it to certain levels at this stage, not in their core infrastructure, but that'll change too. So I think that's the mark of why Gen AI or Web3 is not kind of adopted while Gen AI is. And I
So
think
that's
with that measure, you can always keep saying, hey, this micro trend going to last? Or, for example, copilots. I think copilots are a hype cycle in every kind of technology curve, like the dot-com boom, because
Hmm.
copilots have been in existence for a very long time. They are supposed to increase productivity, but I think some level of reduction in human intervention is the main driver for Gen AI.
Makes
Does that
sense.
make sense?
Yeah.
absolutely. So, borrowing from that thought, right? So, first of all, thanks, Apoorva, for sharing that, like, how Copilots probably might not work out. But borrowing from that thought, let's speak about the foundation on which the whole Gen AI hype is, or probably the whole industry is being built today, right? And this is something that Shiva and I also were discussing in our previous podcast. Now, every weekly update, we bring in at least two new models that are built, right, at a bare minimum. So what's happening today is that the number of models being built is like increasing. Models are increasing their context window, etc., right? And I'm just borrowing a thought from the research industry. Right? So what's happening in the research industry is the number of papers being published, the number of articles coming out has increased over the last decade. But the breakthrough innovations that have happened have gone down, right? And that's why even Goodhart's law states, right, that when the measure becomes the target, it ceases to be a good measure. So what I feel probably is that's the same thing that's happening. Although it's too early to predict for Gen AI, but I feel that's the same thing that's happening right now. People are just focusing on building newer models better than the previous one, context windows, and so on and so forth. But no one is speaking about the opportunities that you have from use cases perspective and so on, right? So what's your thought on that? What are the opportunities that you see probably in this industry being borrowed from these newer updates that's happening?
I think people have always had this tendency of looking at it from, hey, I can build a better model. But I think we are definitely keeping an eye on it. But let me throw another, kind of curveball at you, if you will. You don't need to build 680 horsepower engines for you to commute in a city. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's a great to have, but you have a speed restriction of 65 miles on the freeway, which you can cross up to 75 miles. So 0 to 65 or 0 to 60 in 2 seconds or 5 seconds, in my view, um, is a matter of great to have, not a must have, right? So I'm saying, I am looking at this by saying, hey, I think what's required is reverse engineering application layer to creating models or multimodal capabilities or even integration capabilities or bringing open source and proprietary language models together to be able to create easy applications for entrepreneurs to kind of disrupt industries or for org functions rather than who's building a better model. And that's exactly the reason why we are going to watch the infrastructure generative model space, but we've said we're not going to invest in it because these are probabilistic technologies which are going better and better. But I think our strength also as a team that we've assembled, right? So um, I honestly have not a very nuanced view on model building, so to speak. I'm more of a application reverse engineering kind of guy. Does that make sense to you?
No, absolutely. And then, just a small follow up to that, right? Or probably addition to that thought, right? And what we focus on today, right, Apoorva, as you and I have caught up multiple times, is how do you make these models more consumable? And I was telling Shiva this, right? I think 90% plus cases today we have solved with GPT. We've not even looked at all the other models, and we're making this more consumable, right? So what we are focusing on, or probably where we found success, is how do you make these models more consumable, as you rightly mentioned, like the application side of things, right? That's what we are focusing on. That's what we found success on.
Yeah, and I'm saying it's going to be interesting. I think what Siva is building is super exciting as well because one is um, ca- it's such a niche to be building something where you are using core capabilities of models and then enabling adoption without saying, hey, this is an application, and without having the complexity of adoption happening because of data or information sharing, etc. So I think that's where I have been very clearly attracted to Lyzr and what kind of Siva has built. And we've been through as friends also through cycles of iterations, which we have
Yeah.
discussed and kind of uh, had consensus on. So I think that is another space which is super exciting. I am definitely imagining a founder who is thinking about building a cognitive middleware which would say, hey, you are an insurance company, I will figure out for calling NLP capabilities of large language models, which one should it be? I will be metering them. I will be the payment kind of LLM gateway for you. I'm imagining founders definitely building like synthetic data training models,
Yeah.
so that you don't have to have this industry
Challenge.
stuff. So I'm saying this is the best time to be alive, I guess, if you are in this specific space. So yeah, a lot of exciting
Like,
anticipations there.
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
possibly taking a Mixtral 56B model that they launched recently, just an example, right? And have synthetic data to build a claims processing LLM specifically for insurance companies. And now that becomes a base LLM that insurance companies can work on, and it runs locally in their data center. So yeah, is that something that you're is what you're referring to when you said the specific LLMs trained on open source LLMs with synthetic data for a use case?
I think that depends on how what kind of intelligence you want to build in your organization, right? Like I am in the venture capital space.
Mm.
We are working together in terms of creating, resources who would be AI agents on our team, who would be entrepreneurs in residence on go to market, and chief of staffs to founders, which are basically intelligence instances we want to build for our organization. Similarly, if you look at our area of interest is how do you educate enterprises to first figure out what intelligence they want to build. So in your example, sure, synthetic data. I also think it's too early to assume that the synthetic data which has been built, and I'm not discouraging them. I have all my encouragement to the Mistral team and A16Z. But like, if it was that easy, we would have figured this out much earlier in this. So I'm saying real data has some kind of value.
Absolutely.
I think the focus should be I am sure at mature state in 3 years,
Hmm.
you will see a finance team of an enterprise who would say, I don't need bookkeeping entry people at all because automation is taken care of it with, you know, all the nuances that are required in terms of human intervention and validation. So that level would be completely gone. You just need people on top from audit compliance perspective because that enterprise said, hey, this is the base level accounting is the intelligence I want to build and grow on top of it so that I can, keep increasing because that's a non-core process for me as an enterprise. Like a SaaS company would have finance accounting as a non-core process. So I am imagining a world of, and that's why I love personas, right? Like I've always encouraged you saying, "Hey, Siva," rather than kind of calling it neo analyst, which is like an analyst for everybody. I would recommend you to call it Gary and say Gary has this JD, and then Gary keeps learning, and then there is another Joe who has other JD, and I think that personification of intelligence is something I think at a mature state in 3 5 years all organizations
I think we
start
also
doing.
spoke about the startup called Artisan, right? Last time we met, we spoke about this Y Combinator backed company called Artisan, who does that persona based, the UK based
Yeah,
company.
yeah, that was yeah. That's I mean, look at, and I'm not saying this is a measure of success, but it's just human behavioral science wise, it becomes so much easier to adopt, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I just saw today Harvey announced Series B. I don't know if you saw that, but Harvey,
No.
the lawyer kind of language model, just
Okay.
raised 80 million this morning, announced by Sequoia and Elad, and yeah. So I'm saying
No,
people are.
in fact, that's the next big project that we are looking at. A concept called SLM, small language models, which will take the person of, for example, Apoorva, or will take the person of Rishabh or Siva. But imagine it is not a prompt and a RAG engine powering, it is actually an SLM actually powering. And this architecture is adopted by Character AI, which we came across. It was like fascinating. We started testing it, and it sounds fascinating as well. Yeah, I think right. You're showing the path. You're actually telling us and the founders here as well on what are the different paths that they could take actually
And,
this
and
way.
have you also thought about um, the other side? The reason I was, having this naughty smile is there's been a company that I've been talking to. I don't know if I have the permission to take the name, but I'm sure it doesn't harm them. I just want the best for them. It's called iGo. One of the founders is Peter Voss and Srini. They are taking a completely different approach. They are like, we don't need large language models.
Hmm.
We are going to solve it with cognitive AI. And they are using the chat application and doing some phenomenal work on, competing with, let's say, a Twilio or a MessageBird or, of course, they are very early in their journey, but I've seen their tech work amazingly
So no,
well.
so no transformers.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm at the liberty to share more of their tech, so I won't go into the
Got it. Got it.
details. I will, although, offer you introductions because I think you guys should talk. But
Interesting.
the other way of thinking about it, which is I think all technologies are relevant. The reason I was smiling is you're saying small language models. I am saying information models, which are subject matter expert platforms that you intelligence that you build within your organization. But have you also thought about it from a different perspective? Like if I was imagine Apoorva consuming all these services and a Apoorva cookie dropped across all the chat customer service so that those agents understand where I left off and learn everything about me and provide insights to that organization to offer me, what I like. Do you feel me? So imagine today when I go to Geico, which is what I use for, my renter's insurance or my auto insurance, every time I go to a chatbot or a call, I have to identify myself. But from an intelligence, small language, micro language model perspective, they actually could build those, stuff to keep
Yeah,
track of. Yeah. So
and
yeah,
and doesn't
as I said, it's very interesting where we are.
yeah, I mean, and it doesn't hurt given the fact that the data storage prices have gone, given the fact that the language models are able to handle text patterns. Yeah, I mean that's another idea. So I think that leads to the next point that we want to discuss, which is as a generative AI venture capital firm, what do you? I mean, you already shared quite a bit, but what do you now look at when it comes to investing in founders and companies in this space, which is probably something that a lot of founders listening to this podcast or who will listen to the podcast will be really, really keen. Like who can apply to Vantage Point?
I mean, like I said, we are very clear two buckets. Those two buckets are agent transformation, which is disrupting org functions through agents, which might just start off by reducing, 10 or 20% of human intervention and then build over time intelligence, right? Which ideally are personas. Um, and then the second is a little bit more generic AI ops kind of layer, which would enable this agent transformation for enterprises, right? Which is pretty much everything. I think the way we are looking, so one, in my view, founder market fit is extremely important.
Hmm.
And when I say founder market fit, this is not SaaS where, um, an automobile engineer could build, a world class CRM. And I encourage those stuff. And I'm not saying that it's 100% rule, but I'm saying some kind of understanding of a problem that you are solving and having dealt with that problem will be much more relevant today than yesterday. Let's look at, just subconsciously look at you. You have done this in the past. You have solved people's companies' data problems, DevOps problems, and how nuanced you are with how enterprise adoption happens, and that's going to help you at Lyzr, and I'm sure the same with Rishabh
But
at OML.
but Elon Musk started SpaceX and Tesla after PayPal. I mean, won't he give chances to people who
I
switch?
I wish we had those kind of talents flying in multiples of tens, even tens. Forget about at any given point in time. Those are exceptions. And I want to be supremely clear. I am not saying I will take or not take a meeting with a founder if
Got
they
it.
are not. But I'm saying my responsibility being a venture capitalist and managing my LP's money, who are actually my customers, the founders are my partners. I need to use data and intelligence to able to make that decisions. And the probability today says in the world of agent transformation, founders probability of being successful if they have come across and or worked in an enterprise org function is definitely much higher than a founder who's not been there. So because you asked me, I think, what do you look at Vantage Point? This is something that is
Yeah.
significantly scored in our intake forms. Second, is understanding of adoption nuance, because if you look, and again, I'm not criticizing anybody. I love innovation. Whoever is innovating is great. All founders respected, appreciated. But the traditional SaaS way of consumption of large language model in form of a chatbot or a co-pilot is not going to fly in the world of enterprises. It has to be thought through, saying, how have you structured your architecture in a manner where without pulling real data out of an enterprise, how you are still making your system intelligent and are able to offer an on private cloud instance. That is like our blowover. If a founder comes to us and says, hey, we've thought about this, then you're right up our alley.
Hmm.
And the third is, I think over a period of the next 3 to 5 years, customer acquisition cost, like it used to ultra scale, as some of our good friends have said in the past. Um, in the enterprise world, I don't think it's going to be too much of a CAC problem. So profitability is going to start coming into horizons. In my view, in 3 to 5 years, we will, in the enterprise Gen AI to AGI kind of transition space, we'll see truly lean startups who are profitable and who don't need too much burn. So I think we would love to talk to founders who are thinking of really building, kind of lean startups, and making their way to profitability much faster than later.
Nice. Absolutely. And good, right, on building on top of that point, right? And first of all, thanks, Apoorva, for those details. So I think we've spoken about this a couple of times in the past. What Vantage is focusing right now, obviously, is startups or founders who can actually build a layer that helps the world move from artificial intelligence to AGI, right? And you just mentioned probably one of the focus that you have is how do these startups build or probably these founders build these lean startups and then move to profitability as early as possible, right? But then there's another concept that Vantage has really highlighted heavily in their vision statement, which is the information flywheel, right? That these startups will build on, and how do they actually use that as a moat or a differentiator for the whole world from the whole world, right? So do you want to dive a little deeper into how do these startups build this information flywheel, or what do we even refer to this as a moat?
So it's a very, very, I think it's a very, very opportune place. At the same time, it's a very, very challenging space, right? So one of our key grading or selection criteria mechanisms is business defensibility, which ideally should be for pretty much everybody, and I'm sure everybody is looking at it from that perspective. But defensibility can definitely, and that's why traditionally we've still used data as modes, but in our view, I think data has changed to information. So for us, it's the information flywheel, like you rightly pointed out. And thank you for using our nomenclature. Is because context on a data is much more important now than so let's take a hypothetical scenario. Uber, Lyft, Atlassian, Jira, or Monday.com, whichever you want to take. Jira had a high amount of market share, so did Uber, right? But then founders know how advertising algorithms work. So if there is a Mayfield who's backing a Lyft, they took away a lot of Uber's market share by offerings, pricing, service, advertising strategy, because the algorithms are the same, right? But now, in today's context, if you look at how a customer service agent performs at level 1 for a telecom company, and if a founder has cracked that market and is able to create the product better because of the nuance understanding and the implementation inside the private data walls of that space, but still is able to probably pull synthetic data or create a combination of that synthetic data automatically as they learn, which is not real data but is synthetic data, and then kind of train the models intelligently to be able to deliver better product features, then their market share will never go down, because there is no red ocean strategy. The red ocean strategy was mistakes and marketing and spend and CAC dollars. There will be none if product feature wise, if you're going into an enterprise and your features and this feel is so much better, then there is never going to be a red ocean strategy. So defensibility is supremely key, and that's why, if you remember, I said, hey, architecturally, how the product is being deployed to the enterprise and how the intelligence is those are the two key things for us in terms of the investment selection criteria.
So again, building on that thought, right? And see, as an entrepreneur, and this is more of a selfish question, right, Apoorva. Now, as an entrepreneur, and I always say this, right? Well, technology has transformed at lightning speed, but what's happening in today's world is not something that anyone has seen, right? The way GenAI is changing the world, the way GenAI itself or the whole technology paradigm is changing. And I always say that we've been on this podcast for 40 minutes. We're already 40 minutes behind the world in GenAI, right? So the dilemma that probably as a early startup founder in this space, right, every entrepreneur faces is that one obviously is, as you mentioned, building a robust offering, right, which goes deep into a technology and builds a moat around itself, right. Second is building offerings which are more in or up to date with the latest happenings or latest updates that's happening, right. So probably adopt integrating with Cloud V 2.0 the day that's introduced and so on, right. So what's as you've been in this industry for quite long, right? What is your advice to a startup founder in this area? What should you be focusing on? What where you start developing your moat?
Yeah, apart from, again, just to add to that, apart from the enterprise space, because as Vantage Point Fund, obviously looking at the enterprise space, but the market is also pretty big, right? Like folks are building consumer apps as well, e-commerce apps as well. So how can a founder or a budding entrepreneur can get started? I think that's the question.
I think it's a fair question, and you're right. Sometimes you're so jaded by what you are doing, and my life kind of currently revolves around enterprise. So unless I'm nudged by you, which is thank you for doing that, nudged by you to look at outside your parameter, you usually don't.
Yes.
But um, I I like the consumer productivity Gen AI space, which is where I am one of the largest probably consumers of Mid Journey as well as you know 11 Labs in terms of voiceovers or chat, of course, Chat GPT from a productivity perspective. And I think the dollars don't matter because you're like overall, even if you're paying like a 50 $60 to increase your productivity, which is clearly going up, I think there's huge possibility there. Abundance is also another, kind of nuance which will come up there, and sometimes stable diffusion is going to be better, and then sometimes Midjourney is going to be better, and sometimes DALI. So you got to keep experimenting. But from a founder perspective, I think you really need to do either go deep down into application layer, like some people have, right? Like if you see um, instant real-time translation in different languages. Good application for content creators because now they can suddenly have a larger TAM, which they didn't have. So I think my my clear gap analysis always come from application of what people use perspective, and empathy, kind of plays a very important role there. The second is enablement of those creators. So the enablement layer, like I said, you know, like you are an enablement layer, creating SDKs which will enable people to create these applications faster. Um, and there are gaps which exist everywhere. And then, of course, the
Yeah.
third is completely new thought process. But again, for that problem statement definition is key, which is, let's say, how do you use GenAI in marketplaces, right? ML AI has been used in recommendation engine, network effects, etc. But how do you create a completely new way using GenAI to build the marketplaces of tomorrow? So that's a vertical based approach, right? Like I love marketplaces. Even if we have said, okay, hey, you know what, we are committed to the enterprise space, but if somebody comes and kind of pitches a marketplace solution to me, it's not that I'm going to close my doors. I'm definitely going to learn. So I think those are the three buckets, right? One is clear applications and differentiators. Not there's no point building, in my view, there's no point building another voiceover language model unless you're saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to build it for a frequency which dogs can understand. That's a different story. But I'm saying there is enough in this space. You should be aspirant, but at the same time, I think there is abundance is not going to help. So you create,
Got it.
take these and two applications, and then a gap analysis for enablement, and then the third is completely new vertical based application. That's what I would recommend.
But just to double click on that, sorry, one point, Rishabh. So
No, it's
I feel or I believe that ChatGPT actually did not solve a problem, but it created a new segment altogether. And even Sam in one of his interviews said he never even thought that it would be so successful they had to kind of rethink their whole growth plans. And where I'm coming from is, Apoorva, you've been a founder yourself, you built companies. Today in the Gen AI space, building a startup is much easier and faster. You can pick a smaller problem, or you might have an idea so that you can build on it. Again, what would you recommend to founders? Hey, you know what? Build something, try and sell, iterate, and go that route, or wait and try and identify a problem, which is the YC way, which they always kind of say. Try and identify a problem and try and solve that problem. What's the, because we come across a lot of founders. We ourselves, Rishabh and I, have gone through these cycles as well. So what is that? How do you see from a VC and the
I
founder
think
standpoint?
I think data already suggests, if you look at the successes a few founders have had, they have felt a specific problem supremely deeply.
Hmm.
Have experienced, if it is, if you call it Airbnb, or there are tons of, we don't know the reality, but whatever depth of conversations I've had with founders or have learned or have read in books, is you don't know what was actually the problem or why that inspiration came. But my discovery has been, if you really feel a problem deeply about a problem, then you are going to be curious.
Yes.
And a founder is not curious, then there's not a founder. So naturally, you're going to be a curious founder. And then when you are curious, you're going to talk to a lot of people about that problem and the way you feel about it. And then you'll be like, you know, it it's worth it or not, right? Um, all founders who have gone through this cycle, their conversations, and I have spoken to probably, I don't know, thousands, and
Yeah.
I hope it's 10,000s of founders over the last 10, 15 years. The conversation with those founders who come up with this problem that they have faced themselves, completely different conversation than a founder who has had an idea. And I'm again not discouraging, right? I am encouraging those founders who have ideas also to kind of take that idea and go meet thousands of people, hundreds of people, whatever is possible, to exactly create that kind of a feeling that you face that problem, and check out first with the measure saying, is your idea a real problem or not? Because it breaks my heart to say, but like there are so many founders today who are, uh, you know, like I say, building uh, dam, assuming there are rivers flowing through that dam to solve the problem, but the rivers don't exist. So my red flag to founders who have ideas would be, validate and first validate an idea to a level where you can feel the problem, and lots of other people have the same pain point that you think they have,
Hmm.
before even kind of incorporating a company or thinking about becoming a founder. Because the more ideas you're going to get and the more validation you're going to do, I think the probability of your increased startup success is going to be higher, right? It's like the way we say, right? First, 80% of wars or games are won on strategy, tactical, before you actually play it, and then you just have to execute the plan. So I think creation of problem solution statement which everybody else feels should be the maximum, then execution will happen. You'll find the right people in your team, you'll find the right investors, and then the organic stuff will happen. And then sometimes it's serendipity, right? Like you said, if you look at OpenAI, they wanted to be open. The message was so right. Um, it was generous. There was no equity for the founder. And then when you start serendipitously solving a big problem, commercial angles have to come in, right?
Yeah.
And it's this the way we are programmed. So
Okay.
serendipity is a chance, but I think you can really, like for example, me, right? Why do you think I am so excited? Because for the first time, the first startup that I had was, say, my problem statement was, there is a 5 megapixel camera in a Nokia 6600 phone, and MMS is a failed technology.
Yeah.
I think with cameras growing, UGC is going to become, content is going to be the king. That was my thought process. Timing was way too early, right?
Hmm.
But the second time around, I was like, I picked up a space which is clean tech. Okay.
Hmm.
But in clean tech, there was solar, there was water recycling, rainwater harvesting, tons of things. But the biggest problem was it was ROI, 10
Hmm.
years. Now, LED lighting was instant ROI because as soon as you put up the light, 64% of power is saved, 72 watts down to 32 watts.
Got it.
But capex was high. So then what's your market? So the market was IT enabled services who were super cash rich, hyper OPEX sensitive because their EBITDA multiples decide their valuations if they were in a private equity space or IPO'd already. So they didn't care about depreciating capex upfront, and that's why we were successful because even though lights were 2 times expensive, and then machine learning by saying, hey, you know what, the semiconductor has the capability of changing the shades as per Kelvin degree outside. So if it is cloudy outside, then the lights would become yellowish,
Hmm.
and if it is too much sun outside, it would become whitish or dim down a little bit. So the point I'm trying to come to is even for me, it has been a journey. First one was just a up in the air idea, then problem solution statement, and then another problem solution statement, and that's how you evolve as a founder as well, I guess.
Absolutely. I think two clear messages, and thanks again, Apoorva, as as a startup founder in this space. So me is one, obviously you need to have a very good market fit, market founder fit, not only market fit but a market founder fit, right? And as lean as you can get, right, to probably aim towards that profitability, right? But thanks for that guidance, Apoorva. And again, thanks again for your time, Apoorva. Shiva,
Sure.
any parting questions that you have for Apoorva? We've already
No,
taken a lot of his time.
no, not. I think this has been a fantastic episode. We not yes. I think even the listeners would be able to understand what a VC is thinking, especially a VC in the Gen AI space. How are they thinking? What kind of companies do they look at? What kind of problems do they believe in that could be solved better by generative AI? I think all these are ideally, if this episode could get 10 more people start their startups in Gen AI space, I think we would have made justice. It was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Absolutely
Thank you,
agreed, Shiva.
guys. It was awesome chatting up with you as well. See you on the other
Absolutely.
side.
Sure. Thanks again, Apoorva, as always. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.